Yo, what's good boys? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys some lessons that I took away after recently helping a coaching business scale to $1 million a month. I hopped on multiple sales calls with a particular prospect who was stuck in her high ticket coaching business at around $400,000 a month, right? I'll pop up a clip from one of the calls I took right now. And the 450 to 500K, you said majority of that is from the ads?
Yeah, that's from the ads and the webinar. So we're spending anywhere from 100 to 130K a month on ads.
On these calls that I took with her, I typically don't do one call closes. So we hopped on multiple calls where I audited her process. I went over everything she's doing, gave her a ton of sauce on how to scale to $1 million a month. And there's a bunch of lessons in here that I think you guys could take away if you run a coaching offer yourself, if you're a growth operator in the space and you have clients, if you are in somehow, shape or form related to selling high ticket, info products, this video is going to be for you. In this video, I'm just going to be sharing some lessons that I took away and kind of going over her process and what I told her. And, hopefully you guys get some value in return. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I want to do in this video is give you guys some context on kind of the situation of the business, the situation that this particular prospect was at when she came to me originally at $400,000 a month. That way, when I give you guys the lessons later on in the video, it's all going to make sense and you can kind of put the pieces together as we go. This particular offer was in the B2C info space. And so I don't want to give away the exact niche that this was in, or it'll for sure give away like whose business this was. And I don't want to, dox their shit like that. But just know that it was a B2C offer. It was priced at around, I think it was about 6K when she came to me, but she was in the process of raising it to 7.8K. The business was stuck at around 300K to 400K a month, with the majority of the revenue coming from paid weekly webinars. One thing to know about this business as well is she had a ton of people in different places, right? It wasn't your typical way of running an info business like how I like to run info businesses, which I'll show you in a second. A media buyer, she had specifically an email copywriter. She had hired a sales agency to come in and outsource sales. So it was a bunch of separate people in a bunch of different places. And she didn't really have an operator or, someone like myself to come in and, really take everything over and bring everybody together in order to reach a common goal like $1 million a month, right? She had talked to guys like, Jeremy Haynes. She had talked to guys like Eddie Malouf, like truly some goats in this space. And she had even in the past talked to guys like Ben Bader about potentially running this webinar funnel for her and helping her scale. But just, it didn't work out with them. And, like I said in the intro of this video, it didn't work out with me either, but that's essentially why she came to me. That's why we were hopping on calls in the first place, is to look at me potentially doing this for her. So the typical way that I like to run an info business is super, super lean. So not really how she had it. I think lean teams work really well for info. We are not running, e-commerce businesses where we gotta, sell an actual product with overhead, and we have we have to talk to suppliers, and it's not that complex of a business. It's just info. So I typically like to run this very lean. So I like to have, the offer owner at the top. Typically under that, I like to have a marketer, a sales manager, and if absolutely needed, a back-end sort of ops guy. But for someone like myself, I take care of most of the marketing and operations, and I have a partner help me out with the sales side of things, right? This specific prospect, for example, had a bunch of people in different places. She had, an email copywriter. She had a separate media buyer. She didn't really have an overall marketer. She was kind of like outsourcing that kind of randomly. She would write the ad scripts herself. And then she had someone completely outsourcing sales, an agency who was not affiliated with, the marketer or any side of that business. And so on the first call that I hopped on with her, we hopped on a total of 3 calls. This consisted of me auditing her process, asking her a bunch of questions about what's currently going on in the business, and just getting a better understanding of, solutions that I could implement that can make her more money. So on the first call, the biggest lesson that I want to hand down to you guys is always, always, always scale into profitable actions, okay? Super important lesson here that I really want to emphasize, and I'll tell you how this relates to this specific situation in a second. But whenever you're running any sort of info business, coaching business, anything like that, there's really two rules that you want to follow when you're decision making. It's number one, never cut off a profitable action. And number two, scale into profitable actions until they are no longer profitable, right? And that's something that this particular business owner was having trouble doing. She had some limiting beliefs. I'll try to pop in some clips where I can and where it makes sense. But yeah, let me explain kind of how this relates to her business and what was going on. So one of the very first things she told me when we hopped on a call was that she wanted to lower ad spend and she wanted to focus on organic content. She wanted to really make most of the money from organic content, although originally, like I said, she was in a position where a majority of the revenue was coming from ads, right? So you can see how this doesn't really make sense.
Been ranging between 450 to 500K for the past 3 months. Like, so my goal is to get to 7-figure months.
And for the 450 to 500K, you said majority of that is from the ads?
Yeah, it's from the ads and the webinar. So we've been spending anywhere from 100 to 130K a month on ads.
Obviously, a person like me, I get to the fucking nitty gritty. I get to the details and I go, yo, so like how much are you spending on ads a month, right? She says spending about 100K a month on ads. She said about $25,000 a week, and they were getting about $400,000 back, right? And this was in the form, like I said, of a paid weekly webinar. So they were getting most of the money from ads. And it was a weekly webinar. They were going broad targeting. So it was a little bit of warm, a little bit of cold traffic mixed in. I don't think they really had those things segregated or tracked properly, but this is an immediate red flag. And I called her out on it. Maybe I'll pop up some clips throughout this video. So you're spending about 100 to, 140, 150K a month on ads. You're getting about 400 to 500 back. What's preventing you from just spending more money on ads and just doing what you're doing currently, just at a larger scale? And you can already see why this doesn't make sense. Because guys, if we think about it, okay, she's turning 100K into 400K. She's at about a 4x ROAS right here, right? This is a very profitable action to take. This is something that you would almost certainly want to scale into, right? You would want to dump as much money into. If you were putting $1 into a lottery machine that was giving you $4 back, you would spin that bitch as many times as possible, and you would up the amount that you're spending each time, right? So when she told me that she wanted to lower the ad spend and she wanted to focus on organic, I was very confused. I was like, why is that, right? And so what she told me was that they were spending more money. So as the ad spend increased, the ROAS dropped, right? And obviously I got to the bottom of it and I was like, well, dropped how much? Like, to the point where you weren't profitable anymore. And she said, no, right? It drops to like a 3x. I mean, maybe a 2.5x as sometimes. Sometimes it fluctuates back up to closer to a 3.5 and a 4x, but it's a little bit, inconsistent. Basically had to share this lesson with her the hard way, that at scale, it is okay for your ROAS to drop. Okay, that's actually very predictable. That's very common. And that's something that you should absolutely expect because the math will still play out in your favor most of the time. Profit margin might go down a little bit. Yes, your ROAS will drop, but you will make more overall profit for the business, which is what we are optimizing for. The idea here is very simple. It's that just clicking buttons on Meta Ads Manager and spending more money on something that's already working. And yes, the ROAS will drop. And yes, it'll be a little bit, less, your profit margin will drop, but you'll be more profitable overall, is a way easier solution to scale to 7-figure months. Or even if you're watching this and you're making 50K a month, or you have clients who are doing that, that is a way easier thing to do than to completely pivot gears and try to, get a bunch of new revenue from something like organic, right? Which is super inconsistent. It fluctuates and that just doesn't really make sense. Like in this example, she's spending 100K and she's making 400K back, right? So even if the ROAS drops, and guys, I literally did this example with her live on the call. I'll pop up a clip once again. She did the math in her head and realized that I was correct. To spend more money just to make more money, and you'll do it at a lower ROAS. Maybe it's a 2.5, or maybe you can get it to a 3, etc.
You gotta talk about profitability, right? So let's say I spend 500 ads and we're talking 2.5 ROAS. That'd be like maybe 1.1 and a quarter. Yeah. Right? I'll just spend 500K on ads. I gotta pay my sales team. Sales team is taking a very large chunk. So it's just not going to be profitable. If we're talking, it's not going to be nearly as profitable. Like the more profit is going to come from the organic side. Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it's still profitable for sure.
Right? And so, she was spending 100K to make 400K, which is pretty fantastic. And so, even if she were to go spend 250K the next month, and let's say it's less profitable, it's probably not going to be at a 4x ROAS. That probably won't get you to seven figures right there. But let's say the ROAS drops and it drops to a 3x, right? And she still nets 750K in revenue. Obviously, this is simple math, guys, but in the first example, you're netting 300K profit. And in the second example, you are netting 500K profit. Okay? And so, as you can see here, yes, this is a 4x ROAS. Okay? And this is only a 3x ROAS. But we are optimizing for profit. We are not optimizing for ROAS. We're not optimizing for efficiency. Like the fucking obsession with ROAS and trying to be the most efficient, instead of just scaling into profitable actions is something that I truly don't understand. And it's a mistake that a lot of business owners make. It's a mistake that a lot of operators make when they're operating for clients. And so this is just a prime example of a lesson that I wanted to pass down to you guys after talking to this person, because it's something you should avoid at all costs, right? We want to always scale into profitable actions. Okay, which she did not want to do. She wanted to pivot gears and go to YouTube. So the fact that I could even talk to someone like this and give her this direction potentially saved her business a lot of money. Okay, because without guidance or someone just shooting her straight and keeping it a fucking buck with her, if she just had a bunch of like yes men around her, then she would take an action like this that would significantly fuck over the business, right? And it's going to be that's hard to recover. It's not easy to have a run in info where you're doing numbers like this. You're spending 100K on webinars and making 400K back, right? So anyways, that's lesson number one that I wanted to pass down to you guys. Always scale into profitable actions and never cut off profitable actions. Moving on, lesson number two is going to be in the creative testing department. Okay, so this is going to be a little marketing lesson for those of you who are into that, or if you're having marketing issues right now, right? So we dove into this business, right? And the first thing we do whenever we're auditing a business, especially an established business that's at a scale like this, is we want to take a look at all the data. We really want to see, number one, dialed in tracking and attribution. If you don't have that dialed, that's like a lever you could immediately pull to make more money. I've literally entire videos on my channel dedicated to the importance of data, bottleneck analysis, being able to make decisions based off data and not decisions based off emotions. But none of that is able to occur if you do not have accurate data tracking and attribution, right? So I took a look at her data, and first and foremost, it was a little shaky, right? She had numbers that were there, but there were key indicators that they were a little off. So that's something I just want to, make very clear to you right now. First thing we took a look at was obviously the marketing stats, right? And so we actually took a look at most of the marketing stats, this being overall cost per registrant from the ads to the webinar, the conversion rate on the actual page, the show rate to the webinar, the conversion rate on the webinar, the retention rate on the webinar. And it was actually interesting because the marketing stats looked really solid, except for cost per registrant. Cost per registrant for a paid webinar, well, you'll typically see around $5 to $12. As low as $4 on broad targeting cold traffic. Okay, maybe it's because I'm a goat, I don't know, but you'll typically see between $5 and $12. And her cost per registrant, it wasn't terrible, but it could definitely be improved, and it prompted more questions about the way they were testing creatives, which we ended up identifying a serious bottleneck there, which I'll talk about in a second, right? But her cost per registrant was around $15, right? Which is not terrible, but it's something that could significantly be improved. Like, think about it. If you cut this number down to, in half, maybe you get it to $8, $7, $7.50 around there, you can literally double the ROAS of the funnel, right? And so I asked her, I said, how often are you guys, what does your creative testing process look like? How often are you guys scripting new ads, filming new ads, getting new ads edited? And what she told me was that she scripts and films the ads herself, right? Like, she just on a whim films it. I said, how often do you film this? Is this like a dialed in process? She said 1 time every other month. Like she doesn't even really do it. She just kind of uses old creatives. It's just not really a priority for her because she's a busy offer owner. She doesn't have a ton of time. She's dealing with all these other things. And like I said at the start of the video, I'm not sure she has the team, the correct team members in place to have this covered, right? Because she has a media buyer, an email copywriter, and there's not really a full-on marketer who could come in and take care of something like this. So obviously it depends if this is a new ad account or not, but whenever you launch ads, this is typically what the process is going to look like, and this is why you're going to need a dialed in creative testing process, which I'll talk about in a second. But let's say you launch a new campaign with a bunch of new ads, right? Typically what you'll see, especially if this is your first campaign on the ad account, is your cost per result, your cost per registrant, cost per call, whatever the case is obviously going to rise to start, right? The Pixel's trying to, accumulate data. It's in a learning phase. It's trying to figure out what kind of people are probable to convert with these kind of ads and this funnel setup, etc. So your ad costs are naturally going to rise, right? But as your Pixel accumulates more data and it, essentially learns better and it starts to get a feel for who are the type of people who are converting, right? You'll see your ad costs drop immediately, right? And what's going to happen is it's basically gonna end up stabilizing somewhere at a point where this is your just average, this is your actual like cost per register, right? So that could be like this point right here. Basically, after you let the campaign run for a certain amount of time, it's going to fuck around, it's going to do its thing. You'll see the costs rise, you'll see it lower a little bit. Eventually, if you run it for long enough, it'll end up stabilizing, at some point, right? Whatever number that is for you, whether that's an $150 cost per call, $6 cost per webinar registrant, whatever the case is, it will simply just stabilize, right? But over time, your ads will fatigue, right? And what that means is your ads have been running so long that they will cease to be as effective, meaning your cost per they've fatigued over the audience, right? The frequency of the campaign will be over 3. You'll see that your cost per result will start to climb significantly, and your link click-through rates will drop as a result, right? It will simply like the platform will just tell you that it no longer fucks with these ads. So your job as an operator, as a marketer, if you're ever running ads, and especially in this situation where she hasn't had new ad creatives in like 2 months, is, and her cost per registrant's a little bit high, is clearly she's experiencing some ad fatigue, right? It's very obvious. And so what you need is a dialed in creative testing process to ensure that you're always, relaunching campaigns with new ad creatives that are going to, reset your cost per result back down to its normal amount, and potentially even lower with the right, if you're testing ads, you might find a banger ad that's an absolute winner that crushes and that campaign crushes, and you're going to get a lower cost per result, as a result of that, right? What I recommended to her was get on a consistent, ad creative testing process. What that looks like is weekly ad scripting, weekly ad filming. Next day, you get them edited, and boom, every Friday you have fresh ads ready to go in case you want to launch new campaigns or in case your ads are experiencing fatigue. This is something that if you implement, it's a basic thing that if you implement will significantly lower your cost per result. You will always be testing new creatives and testing new ads to see what's working, and potentially, you have winners, but you can potentially do better than those winners by constantly testing new ads, right? And you'll consistently be avoiding ad fatigue. So you will ensure the lowest ad cost possible if you follow this creative testing process. Third and final lesson that I want to share with you guys today is a sales process lesson, because her sales process was pretty fucked up. There's got to be a way we can increase the ROAS. Like, there's got to be a way that the sales process is fucked up. There's got to be some sales stats that are fucked up. So live on a call, I had her screen share her Looker Studio, and I had her show us the sales stats from the past webinar, right? And what we saw was pretty alarming. So we saw a 40% show rate, and we saw a 25% close rate. Okay. Now, this is indicative of some serious problems within the sales process, right? So a typical show rate should be upwards of 60%, And a close rate, like minimum, you should have 30% close rate, but ideally, if your closers are getting trained, they're getting better, etc., you can push for a 40% close rate. That's depending on the price that they offer. After asking a bunch of questions to her, we realized one of the first things that was going wrong, we went and checked her email open rates on her pre-call email sequences, right? Her email deliverability was fucked, and she didn't even know it. Business at this scale, if you're doing, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, you have so many calls being booked on a daily basis, I would highly recommend having a backup domain constantly warming up and being ready to go, right? Because what she told me is that they're in the process of getting a new domain. That's what she told me. And so they're waiting on that, right? But if you were being proactive and not reactive, this domain would already be cooked up and ready to go. So there would be no drop-off time between when this domain fails and starts landing in spam and when you can launch this new domain. Because what had happened was your show rate is riding strong at a 60%. All of a sudden your email deliverability tanks. It's once again, you want to minimize the time. Like the amount of times like problems like this pop up is you want to minimize the amount of time that you're dealing with this problem by implementing solutions fast, right? So if you had a backup domain ready to go, especially once again for a business at this scale, you could immediately just launch that, get the show rate back up, and your revenue would not drop that much. But of course she was, dealing with a drop in revenue, and she felt like she could have been doing more numbers because of problems like this that weren't getting solved in a timely manner. The problem that she was struggling with, which was tanking her show rate, was setters were not qualifying, okay? What the setters were doing were just calling people and confirming them and basically just confirming that they would show up to the call, right? And that's a big problem, especially with the next point that I'm gonna make, which is kind of crazy. What the setter should be doing is following an actual process that we follow, like BANT, right? Which is qualifying people for budget, authority, need, and time. So if someone books onto the calendar, we don't just call them and say, hey, are you sure you're going to show up to your call? Okay, yes. Okay, boom, you're green. No, we call them and we go through a process of asking them questions to make sure that they actually, are a probable person to convert on the closing call before we actually put them on the closing call, all right? Or else that's how your sales stats get fucked up, and that's how you see a 25% close rate. If someone doesn't have all four, right? Budget, can they actually afford the product? Authority, are they the main decision maker? Like, are they going to be the person who actually decides whether they buy the product? They don't have the need for the product. Avoid getting unserious people on the calendar, right? So the setters weren't qualifying them. They were just calling them and saying, yo, are you sure you're going to show up to your call? Boom, okay, you're good. Put them on the closer's calendar, right? So they were taking a ton of call volume. There were probably really qualified leads who couldn't get on the calendar because I'll explain how the calendars were full in a second. But these unserious people took up calendar spots that serious qualified people could have taken up while they were warm and while they were hot. That brings me to my next point, and why these 2 points together just completely will fuck over the business, is that the calendars were full. Right? And you might be like, Jason, why is that a bad thing? Well, what she told me was that the sales team and the person who was managing her sales team was intentionally hiring less closers than needed. That way, each closer's calendar was maximally full, 10 to 12 calls a day, because they wanted each closer to be making $20K per month. That's just a number they had in their head. They just wanted each closer to be paped up, making minimum $20,000 a month. And if a closer couldn't come in and make $20,000 a month, they weren't going to hire them. Right? One of the easiest ways to scale a business like this, if your calendars are full and there's people who physically cannot book on the calendar, you're losing money. One of the easiest ways to fix this problem is to hire more sales reps. And yes, that means your current sales reps will make a little bit less money, but you scale the sales team and you hire more sales reps. As an example, you're taking 10 calls a day with one closer, right? You're packed out. That's the most you can take, and every single day you're booked out, right? What you should do is hire another closer, and let's say that gets you to 18 calls a day, right? With 2 closers, it's like, yes, each closer is taking 9 calls, and so they're taking less calls, they're going to be making less money, but overall, the business is making more money, right? And you should always prioritize the business over like individual sales reps. I don't know why she wasn't doing this. I don't know why she wasn't yelling at her sales manager for doing this, but this is ridiculous, right? Sales manager was preventing the business from making more money for his own selfish and his own team's selfish gain because they were going to make more individual money. That is absolutely crazy in my opinion. But it's a lesson I want to pass down, and it's something that we learned while we were, auditing this business. And so this brings me to my final lesson of the video, which goes back to something I said earlier, and it's about the team structure, right? So, bro, I've been a part of, $1 million a month offers. I've seen $1 million a month sales teams. I've seen it all. I promise you, I've been there and done that. And the best way, the absolute best way, is if you have an offer owner, you have a marketer, you have a sales manager, and these 3 people alone, right? Maybe under this person, you have a copywriter, who knows, right? And then under this person, you have sales reps, right? You have setters, closers, etc. You need every single person on the team to be bought in amongst the same goal, which is making the business more money. Okay? That's it. When you have people in a bunch of people in a bunch of different places, like I showed you earlier, when you have random people doing random things, you have an email copywriter, you have a media buyer, a sales manager, they're from separate organizations. This is a separate sales agency. These are some freelancers that she kind of found, right? When you have all these people who are not bought in on the same goal, they're all going in different directions, the business will not operate smoothly. I'm telling you in info, lean teams are the fucking move. Anyways, those are some of the biggest lessons I learned from auditing this $400,000 a month business and telling them how to get to $1 million a month. It's unfortunate that the deal just didn't end up working out, but it's part of the game, boys. It happens. But I do hope you enjoyed this video. I learned a lot from just like talking to that business, and it really challenged me to get better as an operator myself. So if you're an offer owner, a coach, a consultant, or a growth operator yourself, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I make the videos for you guys. So just passing down some lessons that, I'm learning on a daily basis because I do this every single day. So anyways, boys, I love you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you guys in the next one.